Hello, hello, hello.
Hello.
Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday. I
You are Amy Solara?
I am Amy Solara and you're
Hey.
Jeremy Renta. I was laughing because I thought we need to figure out an intro. Like for two well-trained actors and film creators and people who are ruled by Venus in various ways. How have we not figured out an elegant intro to this podcast?
It's like, instead of me saying, oh, hi, or pretending like this is a phone call. Yeah, you're right. I'm not really certain. It's a little bit of a creative block.
Maybe that's always the thing, is this is just a phone call that we record because you and I have the most magical phone calls.
It's true.
Like the hour that we spent talking to each other earlier today could be a podcast in and of itself.
I just want to go back and listen to myself talk to you. That's the greatest. I mean, that's the reason why we're doing this in the first place, right? That's why we started. Like, we should actually record this. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's true. It's 100% true. You and I were driving down to Joshua Tree to sit in ayahuasca ceremony, and we're having the most wonderful conversation for those, 3.5 hours because of LA traffic?
Yeah.
And we were like, damn, we should record this.
I'm sure other people would want to listen in on this as well. Not just the CIA.
And deep state. I was also the idea of, I'm sure other people are questions and other people are having the same conversations, and maybe by us recording the conversations that we have, they will either be inspired to carry those conversations further with research and with practice and with engaging in a community that values these things, or they'll be inspired to have the conversation in the first place when they might not have been may not have felt safe enough to do so.
Well, I mean, I definitely felt that way with any of the free thinkers and people who started podcasts, 10 years ago when I first started listening. It was almost as though it was I was given permission to think those things. I mean, again, coming out of the early 2000s, there was a lot of, you just do what the establishment tells you. Like, there was a whole lot of that, So getting to a point where people were just voicing their opinions in the first place. There was a lot of shutdown on freedom of speech after 9/11, I believe. And, being able to, whether it's esoteric ideas or anything, just like having questions about what is normally kind of dumped into our ears. That was something that was huge for me. I started out listening to a lot of Adam Carolla. I was living in LA when he still had a talk radio show, and that was, just hearing somebody who was, even if it was just somebody being cadre like Adam is, kind of the personality that he has. It's like they're voicing their opinion, and it was a reminder too for me of, like, spending time with my grandmother. Learning from somebody who has experience, and even if they're just bitching about it, it's hearing somebody's point of view, as opposed to actually hearing somebody's opinion about something, as opposed to just hearing somebody talk about, well, did you see that thing on Fox News the other day? It's like, no, I didn't. And I honestly don't have an opinion about it because I don't care about that, So, and that's, I think, that one of the great things about having this chance too, is like, podcasting and interviews give you a peek inside of somebody else's mind. So no matter if the amount of people that are listening to us is large or small, they're getting little chunks of something that may actually have a positive effect on them, or, like you said, trigger them to look for something else out there in the world.
I was joking. Who was I joking with recently? Where I said, the book club that I'm doing, I was like, Bridget's kind of like the gateway drug goddess. Like, what? But it was like, to the point of what you're saying, I hope that we can be the gateway podcast. I know we're kind of a little beyond that.
We're like, a little fringe. Yeah.
If you found us, then this is like the gateway to like the real woo-woo stuff. Because chances are you're already either a psychonaut in that kind of psychedelic, I'd love to journey sense, or you're very strong practicing yogi who wants to deepen their practice further with mantra and meditation, or you're on the witchy path, but you like maybe haven't solidified your practice yet. But either way, you're a person who's open to experiencing weird phenomena.
Yeah.
And so maybe you and I are getting to step into those roles of magician and high priestess and open the doorway a little bit further for other people.
I'll be a gateway drug for somebody. That's cool. I'm down for that.
I'm not everyone's cup of tea, but I'm somebody's gateway drug. Can we make that a bumper sticker?
I'm sure you were voted that in high school.
With most like likely, a bunch of
most likely
red
to be
pills in the background.
Yeah, most likely to be someone's gateway drug.
No, in high school, I was probably voted most likely to be a professional dancer.
Wow, really?
I was obsessed with it. That's all I ever told people about. I did it.
You're good. I know you did.
I made it to that goal.
You made that and being a mermaid. I remember that was on your goal.
Yes.
And after actually the summer that I met you, or the summer after. No, it was the summer. It was 2015.
Yeah, the summer I met you.
Yeah.
Summer after our first ceremony together, I became a mermaid officially in a mermaid talent troupe in Los Angeles and was photographed for LA Weekly in Malibu with a tail. Like that checked that box.
You're like, I got to raise my standards, man.
I do. Like, okay, so if I accomplished becoming a mythical creature, what else is on the bucket list? Speaking of transformations.
Speaking of.
We're so good at bringing it back around. The theme for today's podcast that you and I decided on is how far we've come and where we started. Started at the bottom and now we're here. It's the idea that no matter where you are when you're listening to this, the fact that you are searching and you are seeking is what is important. And please, please, please don't give up the search.
Yeah, I want to give a big shout out to all my teachers. Just starting off this podcast, there's definitely something there when it comes to someone who either knows more than you do in a situation or is so passionate about something that they make that their life's journey that propels other people to kind of like end up following part of that path. And, there's, for me, remembering to acknowledge where I came from is a big thing. It's that whole beginner's mind thing. Being able to go back to where you were, be able to look at something with fresh eyes, remembering where I was when I was a kid sitting in a history class and having a teacher who was, Mr. Vick when I was in my sophomore year, talking about history in an exciting way was something that propelled me to want to find out more about, how we as a society got to where we are. And I think that's, I can trace that back or trace that to where I am now, like not believing completely everything that I'm told. And then, a good teacher is going to make you question and want to grow. So, look back at the places where you came from. Like that's something that's incredibly helpful on the reg to see how far you've come and to see what kind of got you there too. Like, what kind of brought this up for us to really to kind of discuss this. I asked you if putting up our old podcast from 5 years ago was really something that we wanted to promote just because we were in such a different mindset. And a lot of the things that at least I was talking about was like drinking more plant medicine with not as much deference. I think like that was a bigger part of my life when I was then as well. And, but it was also like, there's it's kind of a fringe idea. And I feel like a lot of the times, which this is a thing that I've done with spirituality as well, is kind of worn it as a tail feather. It's like, I'm special because of, and that's definitely not the case. It's one of the ways that mama will slap you down. And it's, it was
the combo junkie.
Yeah, seriously. You sit in a plant medicine ceremony long enough, or if you do, even in the first time, if you go in with it from a standpoint of thinking that's the goal, like getting the medium confused with the message, or getting the process confused with the actual goal of whatever it is it's a lesson that you can learn, but it's also like you have to. It's a way for it to. It's a reminder to constantly be paying attention to where your mind is in the experience. You know, so with plant medicine, I did learn a lot. Like in the time that I worked with ayahuasca, and the time that I worked with other types of sacred plant medicines, there was a lot of growth. And then it gets to a certain point where if you haven't integrated a lot of the things that the plant is giving you, or that the spirits, in it, whatever way you want to look at it, the plant medicines a lot of the times are um, they're a transportation method to get to that state of consciousness without it being, oh, dude, I'm a psychonaut or whatever, having that, again, cultural idea around it, but being able to say, this is a growth process, and these ideas are presented to you through this medicine. Well, if you don't integrate that stuff, the medicine will reject you, and the energies themselves will reject you. They'll just be like, all right, well, you haven't taken any of this stuff in, you haven't implemented it in your life. And it got to the point for me too, where sitting in ceremony, I stopped journeying.
Yeah.
I stopped learning, because mama's like, you have a lot of books on your shelf and you're not reading them. You have to take the things that I've given you, and you have to start to integrate them, which was one of the things that led me out of plant ceremony. It led me out of service in that way, because the message that I got one of the last times that I sat as a guardian was, it's time for you to take your healing out of the dome. It was time for me to take the things that I was learning and actually start to implement them. And it was, it's a hard lesson to learn, because it's an ego check. It's like I have been defining myself by these experiences. And this was on one of the old podcasts that we talked about too. It's like we define ourselves by these stereotypical things of like, I'm an alcoholic, I'm a pothead, I'm a bad boyfriend, I'm whatever these things are. And we get stuck in that, as opposed to saying, this is a lesson. This is Saturn coming back around again. Like, this is a lesson that you're supposed to learn. And if you don't learn the lesson, you're going to keep getting hammered by this thing. You don't get defined by it, but it's going to keep on smacking you, and you're going to self-define. And then if you don't get over it, you're going to die and have to come back and learn the same fucking lesson, in your next life.
100%.
Yeah.
And that's why all the things we talk about are so useful, because I think they help with integration.
Right.
Like, what was I doing the day I met you with in ceremony? I was using tarot cards.
Mm-hmm.
What was I experiencing, and therefore driving me to learn more about? I was experiencing my Saturn return, and so I had begun a serious study of astrology, where I remember we were at the Iliad bookstore, you and I was like, oh my God, this is the book I've been looking for. And it was the only astrology book you ever need. And I still have that thing dog-eared and tabbed and marked all in the margins. Because I knew that there was something practical that needed to be done beyond ceremony. And I got the same message as you after a while, because I think I had sat like 10 times within 6 months. And this was actually before I met you. I had sat very repeatedly wanting answers that you kind of have to get from life experience. And I think that was part of the lesson that I was telling me, was like, I'm not just going to tell you your life. Like, you have to live it, honey. And
that's not how this works.
Yeah. She was like, you're not allowed to come back until you stop doing these things that are harming you. And they're harming you. That it's not a healthy habit to smoke organic, hand-rolled, chemical-free tobacco. Still smoking, babe. You're not allowed to imbibe alcohol in the way you have been. Was a very clear message from her. I was not allowed to date the way that I had been, because it was an unhealthy, slightly self-sabotaging, and very much attention-seeking way of fulfilling an emptiness inside myself that I didn't want to have to face. And so when I got that message, you're not allowed to come back until you've handled this, I was so pissed, because I thought, no, I was on the fast track to enlightenment. This stuff was going to help me like bypass. And that's what it was. I was trying to bypass. And that's something we talk about a lot on this podcast, and just in life in general, is how do we not spiritually bypass? And you have to integrate. You have to bring it all back to literally everyday life. And I was just reading, actually, before this, I was flipping through the end of the Magdalene Manuscript book, where Judy Sion is telling her own personal story, and something like jumped out at me, which was, every single one of us lives multiple lives in multiple ways, but we're all just kind of chapters in the same giant book that is us, the divine, because we all do come back to that, but you have to actually live it. It's a choice every single day, every minute, every chance you get, whether you're in the bathroom or the kitchen or the living room, whether you're in the car or the backyard or on a stage in front of thousands of people. It doesn't matter whether you're being seen by everyone in the universe or only by your child or your spouse or yourself in the mirror. It's a choice to consciously step forward from where you were and say, I'm not gonna play into that karma anymore. I'm not gonna repeat that pattern again. This is literally the last time, last one, last whatever, because I'm aware of it now. I've stepped into self-awareness, and all these tools that we talk about, mantra, tarot, astrology, normal Western witchcraft and Eastern tantra, like everything all comes back to this idea of getting to know yourself better. Know thesauton, know thyself. It's like the ultimate passage into communicating with the gods and communicating with your highest self.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the places where there's a lot of empowerment when it comes to any of these types of practices, because you're taking responsibility for your own actions. You're taking responsibility for the path that you're on. And there's a lot of, we've talked about this before, about relearning the things that we already know. Like, again, if you're looking at it from a standpoint of we'll say Western esotericism, with the idea of the five elements, or this, with spirit, I guess that is the fifth element. Outside of all of these things, fire is fire, water is water, earth is earth, air is air, and spirit is spirit, without having the container of all those things put together as one, which is what our human body is, with spirit included, you've got all possibilities that are open and available to you. So I think being in human form and having a manifest form there's a little bit of what's the term that amnesia that Graham Hancock even talks about. Like we're a society, we're a species with amnesia. Yeah, and I think it goes beyond just sacred sites. I think that's the tip of the iceberg with that. Like, we as humanity are that way, and I think that there's something about that where this really is a proving ground. Are you able to get past the fact that you forgot about these things and remember that you are divine? Remember that we are a part of the whole. We're literally God viewing itself through the lens of flesh. Whether it's Jesus from the standpoint of, again, the Hebrew idea of Yud He Shin Vav He, or Yahshua, or Jesus. That is all of the elements. It is Yud, fire; He, which is water; Shin, which is spirit; Vav, which is air; and He, or final He, which is earth. So it's the manifestation. It's all of those things. So that is us literally looking back out at the universe going, what does this all mean? Well, that's the point. You're supposed to remember it. And then you can move on to a higher state, so that you go, okay, I've finished level 1. Now we can advance to level 2. And whether that means being in a larger form, whether that means being completely disembodied, I don't think that's necessarily it, because having a tangible form is, as anyone who's worked in the spirit realm, is something that spirits are very they're enticed by. Yeah, exactly. They're like, hey, let's work together, Yeah.
So, well, my friend and teacher Andy always says, if you're in a body and listening to me right now, then you've won the lotto. Like, if you're in a body and watching her videos, you are in a state of having bested so many other beings on the way in, because even though we have more human beings on this planet than we ever have had at any time, we also have more non-beings, non like physical beings interested in being here on this planet than we have at any other time. We're this earth really is magical. It's different
Yeah.
than so many other ways of existing, so many other places of existing, other dimensions. It's multi-dimensional. It's working on all these different dimensions. That's why it's attracting so many things. We've got the mycelium network working way down low in the first and second. We've got all sorts of people trying to project ideas on us in the fourth and the sixth, and light workers working on the fifth and up. And it's like so complicated when you start getting into it. And it's very heady. And a lot of people are like, what are you even talking about? All these dimensions. You can Google it and you'll find other people talking about multidimensional things. And that's something I work with my one-on-one clients, is figuring out where they feel most comfortable in those upper worlds. And where they feel least comfortable in those upper worlds, and where maybe some of their shadows are residing, and how we can really learn to work with those shadows to kind of clear them and clear the space and send more light out in all directions on all levels, because we want to shine a light on ourselves first and foremost, so that we become not only fully aware, right? You're enlightening. So you're creating light within, enlightening, but you're also through that light seeing the truth of yourself. And the more that you are in that truth state, then the more aligned you are with the cosmos in general, in terms of like the divine is in everything, and therefore the divine's within you. But also the more that you do that, the more embodied you become, the more whole you become, and
more integrated.
All of your pieces of yourself come back together. And that's what shaman soul retrieval is gathering up all the pieces you've left behind in other lifetimes, in early childhood trauma, in other dimensions, other realms, other places that a lot of people don't even realize exist, with parallel worlds and timelines of ourselves, and kind of drawing it all back together. They say that's what Hathor did when she ascended, is she literally made herself whole. She became a whole being, and then she arose.
Well, again, that's something Mitch Horowitz talks about as well, of kind of like actively changing your past, like talking to people that may have passed, or are looking at yourself in a situation and imagining yourself doing it differently. Like not looking at it from a shame standpoint of if only, but looking at it from the standpoint of that you did make that decision, and that, it was just up until now that those changes in your action could actually start to take place. So there's not like there's still an acceptance of responsibility with anything that we're doing in our lives, but there's this idea too that, shame becomes an energy in and of itself. And shame, while a lot of the time it comes from inside, it's usually cast on us by our parents, by our culture, by the religious institutions that we are, I will say, forced into as a kid.
Surrounded by.
Yeah. But there's so much power in shame, and we live in a shame-based culture. That's the reason why sexuality is so confined in Christianity, because that is literally one of the easiest ways, especially if you're looking at it from the tantric standpoint, of connecting with the divine, because you're saying, right, I'm doing this, I'm making love, I'm connecting with myself from this chakra, and I'm doing it in honor of, as opposed to something that has to be hidden.
And it's also, talking about being in a body, what a tool,
right?
Of magic. Holy cow. So many people,
no pun intended.
Yeah, they don't, because of the way that we've been brought up, they don't realize that literally the fastest way to increase your energetic capacity, like your ability to hold vast amounts of energy within your field, comes from being able to use and explore the energy that comes out of
our second chakra.
Not just sex,
yeah,
but the organs that are associated with all of it, like being able to ride the waves that come with it. Like with Tantra, you're working, you can work alone or with a partner. It's faster with a partner.
Mm-hmm.
It's always accelerated when you're working with another.
Any type of
right?
magic is, yep.
Any type of magic is. The second that you see that other person who's in a body who is seemingly separate from you and you unite with them, you're doing magic just by that. And a lot of people that are in the sex positive community, even though that's helping a lot of humans get back in touch with themselves, don't realize just how much they're mixed up with their auras and everyone else who's been stepping in them, because they're just having sex as much as they can, as opposed to as consciously as they can.
Right. Well, two thoughts on that too. I think when you do join with somebody in that form, you are literally, again, seeing the divine in somebody else, and being in a sexual situation with someone. You are literally being as stripped and as naked as possible, and hopefully being as honest as possible. And if they're doing the same thing back, then you're like, we are all one. You literally can see that in relationship, which is one of the reasons why I think porn has such a detrimental effect on our society, because there's so much degradation to it. There's like, it becomes a monetized thing. Like I think we've talked about it before, where you can, my partner is able to sense if it's ever been in the house, and it is literally like other energies, I think, again, are able to connect to the images or whatever else it is, the energy source that's actually coming into the house or coming in through the phone lines, the 56K modem that you're using.
What have you been up to? Time traveling again, are we?
Well, there you go. That's another energy that these things can latch onto, and if it's not being used in a positive way, it will most likely be used in a negative way. So you have to be conscious of how you're using it. That's the first thing, and I can't remember what the second thing was because I went off on a tangent about 56K modems.
It's okay. I want to jump on that tangent with, you are doing an act of worship.
Yes.
If you're watching porn.
Yeah.
Like, you are literally worshiping the image on the screen, like an idol. Like when they talk about false idols, there you have it. That you're offering your energy to what you believe you are seeing, because you aren't seeing reality. It's a complete illusion, especially with like the majority of well-produced porn. And as much as I want to believe the women that I've spoken with who are sex workers who are like, I feel so empowered, I want to like really sit down with a lot of them and say like, okay, but are you though? Because so many times there are so many levels to why they're doing what they're doing. It's not just like I'm celebrating my sexuality. Like if you're just celebrating your sexuality, then why are you selling it the way that you are sometimes?
Right.
And I can't speak for everyone. There might be some women who are fully empowered, but then I would highly encourage them to really consider who is viewing them and why, and what they might be doing in those people's lives, because it is an illusion. I think one of the best films that illustrated this for people who are on both sides of the fence of like, this is great and it's empowering, this is terrible and it's ruining people's lives, is the one with Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Don John.
Yeah.
And just the way that it illustrates what it does, because he feels powerful, he feels sexual, he feels like he's in control, but he realizes he's not. And that he has never had, truly ever had, a deep connection with any of the women he slept with because of it. Because he doesn't know how to connect to the soul of the being. He only knows how to connect to the energies that are present in the room when he's in that state.
Right. And a lot of that is bolstered. I think a lot of that's bolstered by ego. It's like you're seeing yourself as whatever. And that's exactly what the movie's about, right? It's him kind of seeing himself as a Don Juan.
Yeah. And he has to like break that open in order to find the connection. And something a lot of people don't want to talk about in today's understanding of Tantra, because it's become so popular. It's become this way for couples to connect. It's become this really popular thing on podcasts of like sex magic and Tantra. And I've even been guilty of buying into the mystique of it in the past. Now I wholly revere it, and I'm very, very careful about the way that I engage in in not only sexual acts, but like the thoughts surrounding it before and during, and because you're creating things.
You're creating hopefully you're creating a sacred space before you start too, and during and after.
But the old days of the left-hand path were really horrid. They were really awful. And a lot of people don't know that. They think, oh, they were just shunned because they were seen as like cheating and like using sex to get past the other people who were just sitting and meditating. And while there might have been a few who were doing it in a way that was respectful, the majority of the practitioners of this type of tantra where you're engaging in sexual acts were using sex slaves.
Well, I mean, that's it wasn't just the left-hand path for that either. The Brahmin priests were doing the same thing. They would, women whose kundalini is naturally active, they were, like you said, they were using them pretty much as slaves to be able to activate their own kundalini, and through that, being able to tap into more sources of magic or more sources of energy for them to use magic. And then they were also selling indulgences, like, just like with just like with the Catholic priest, just like with the Catholic Church, like religion itself can become a tool of whatever the human is that's using it for, which is why spirituality and why religion is, such a sacred thing. This is kind of tangential, but the other day I was like, I was thinking about the fact that, the practices that I do aren't necessarily seen as normal by most of society. It's coming around a little bit more. People are being inquisitive, but for you to actually go out into public and say, I'm a witch or I'm a magician or I'm a whatever else, people give you some very strange looks. And I was thinking, people they say you don't talk about politics and you don't talk about religion. And I want to say that the people who first started saying you don't talk about religion are the people who were getting burned on the cross or burned at the stake. And it's like, you just don't talk about it. Let's just not bring it up. It's probably for the best, and it's something that I'm aware of, that even now there's a quiet prejudice about it, but it's still very much there, no matter what it is that you're talking about that are, what it is that your practices are. And there is a fine line of being able to kind of delve into that. A little bit of a tangent, but I did remember what the other thing was. So we're talking about just past stuff. This is kind of what got us on this topic in the first place for the podcast. A lot of the recordings that we posted from the stuff that we recorded 5 years ago, like you said, your views on relationships was completely different. Mine was as well. Like I was at that point in time, I was listening to a lot of Chris Ryan, a lot of like, are we supposed to be a monogamous culture, like that type of thing.
And Aubrey Marcus too.
Yeah, he's still kind of in that. Yeah. So, and it's, again, when I was younger, all I ever wanted was to be in a relationship. I knew that the woman,
Libra.
I know, all I ever wanted was to be in love and to be in a relationship. And when I got into my late 20s and early 30s, after having a failed marriage and after having multiple relationships that did not work out, I was like, I don't know if I can keep moving down this path. Like I just keep getting my heart broken. Again, I was listening to one of the podcasts that we'd recorded before, and I was talking to Chris. It was one of the episodes where you were on tour. And I was like, dude, I was like, what do you think about soulmates? What do you think about love? I was like, I feel like I've kind of given up. And it was hard for me to say that because I was listening to it in front of my partner, who is my soulmate, who is the woman that I literally have been looking for my entire life. When I first met her on your couch, I was like, this is the reason I'm in Phoenix, and Lindsay Qualicara, my partner, she was like, she again was shocked by what she was hearing. She's like, I've just never heard this side of you before. And I was like, this is where I was. That was literally my rock bottom, for the thing that you feel like is your sole purpose, the reason why you're on this planet, to be saying that that's not even a possibility for you. Like that's well, we have pretty to
remember where I was at that time too.
Right.
I'm never going to have kids.
You said that numerous times.
I never want to be a mother.
Right.
I never want, I said that more, I think more to try and convince myself than anybody else I was ever in conversation with. I think everybody I talked to knew it. Just like when you were saying all those things, everybody you talked to was like,
Right.
She just hasn't walked into your life yet.
Right.
Come on,
Well, it's
give it a
funny
break.
too, because you're saying that about not wanting to be a mom, and I know that I think it's in the second or fourth episode, one of the ones that we recorded, you were saying that you had that experience in ceremony where
Hmm.
the energy actually came to you.
Where I had multiple ceremonies where I saw a being that I was like, okay, you're totally my kid. But I had one ceremony in particular where I was able to see a lot of, well, all of the karma babies. So the ones who wanted to come through me to be my child in order to clear karma.
Mm-hmm.
And I had spoken with one of the guardians not too long before that ceremony about how she had cleared out her karma babies. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, I don't want to get pregnant with someone who has karma kids. She's like, I don't want to birth a child that I'm going to be fighting with my whole life in order to fulfill something that I owe,
Mm-hmm.
a debt that I owe. I'd rather just clear the debt. And I was like, you can do that? I was like, what do you mean you can just clear karma? And so I remember during that ceremony, I hadn't had an emotional release like that for a little while in ceremonial space. I had 3 people doing Reiki on me at the same time. I had one person working over my heart, my womb. I had someone on my feet, and I had someone on my head. And I was on the healing mat and shaking and crying, and I should have been vomiting, but I had already done that enough that it's gone. And I remember seeing these little soul babies and just thinking to myself, like, no, I am not going to engage in this. I'm not going to keep the cycle of karma continuing. I'm going to break it right now. And I want you to go back to love and light. And I want you to go back and be healed. And I'm not going to be the one that you're doing it through, because I do not want to perpetuate this cycle. I do not want to engage in this karmic tie that you have tied to me. And if you've wronged me, I forgive you. If I've wronged you, please forgive me. And I just did this whole process where I was releasing. And after that ceremony, I was like, nope, I'm not having kids now. And it took a whole nother ceremony to bring me back to the, oh God, she's going to make me have kids.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, the episode you're talking about, where I went through the birth process in ceremonial space, where she basically made me have a baby, and I had to surrender to the idea that possibly this lifetime I might have a child.
Or 2.
Or more.
Or more.
I'm not done yet. I know that.
Yeah. Well, again, coming back to that, there are a lot of times that you're presented with something in ceremony that, you're stripped pretty raw. And there's stuff that comes through where you're like, no, like people talk about not wanting to be involved in, or not wanting to open up to those possibilities. Like, and this is making me really appreciate the old podcast that we had. There's a lot about like not wanting to see that in yourself. Again, we have to come through, and I feel like we have to have a bit of amnesia, because otherwise, if you know the score, then that's the whole thing of free will. It's like, well, are you going to go off path and realize you're going to come back to it? Are you going to, are you actually going to do it straight through? Are you going to?
That's the fun too. Like, God she's really got a big sense of humor.
Yeah.
Like, I do, in my belief system, believe that there was like a beginning, when there was a being that was the beginning. And I feel like I like calling her feminine when she starts the beginning, because I feel like in my reality, females give birth, and therefore that makes sense to me. And I also fully respect the idea that the cosmos started with a giant big bang that is the sound of Om, and we're all in a dream coming out of a giant God's belly button who's still sleeping. So like, I'm able to hold many, many creation stories in my mind. That being said, I feel like God has a sense of humor.
Right.
Whether you call it he, she, or they have a sense of humor, and they like to see the plot twists. They like to see how we handle the cards we're dealt. This is the fun part in astrology. You can look at someone's chart. My teacher, Deborah Silverman, was saying this. I'm in the middle of her class right now, and I absolutely love it. It's the idea that you can look at someone's chart before you get into a room with them, and you can think, okay, this person has this planet over here and it's aspecting this planet over here in this house in this sign, and they're totally going to be like this. And you walk in the room and you're like, oh, that's what you did with it. there's no guarantee, that it's going to be the high road or the low road. You can surprise everyone in either direction, and that's the fun. That's why we're living, is to see what happens. We're like, okay, let's roll the dice. Okay, you get this number and you get this number, and let's see what you do with it. And maybe it's like Harry Potter, where Neville was born on the same day, and Voldemort chose Harry, and therefore Neville had a different life than Harry did because of it. And they were born on the same day at the same time. And it's like, God, what if Neville had been the boy who lived?
I don't know if the books would have been as big a seller with Neville Longbottom in the Chamber of Secrets.
Right? I know. But it's still exactly like the universe got the super fun side.
Right.
They got the really exciting story. Or it's like in Peter Pan when Wendy could have chosen to say no. When Peter was like, come on, let's go fly. She could have been like,
nah, creep.
Rather get some good beauty rest. I'm going to go to sleep and grow up. If she had, there wouldn't be any story. If the parents had come back home from the party in time, there wouldn't be any story. And we love stories. We love stories. That's why we're stuck in our stories. We love them so much that we just get bogged down in the story and the belief systems. Like what you were talking about before when you were saying, like, you identify as these things. It's all a belief. It's not a truth. It has nothing to do with truth. It has everything to do with your perspective. And that's why it's important to find the truth of you, because then you begin to find the truth within these stories. You begin to clear out the ones that aren't true. And this is what we do in Akashic when we do Akashic Records readings and working in the Akashic fields. It's divining the truth, finding the true plot lines, and figuring out where people have, tied knots in the web that don't need to be there. And something that my teacher and friend Andy said recently that was like an interesting perspective for me is you can't go in and just like change the records. You can't go like delete a file.
Right.
It's not like you're going to go in and say like, I didn't like this choice I made, so I'm just going to toss it out. We don't need to have that piece of paper in here. No, you go back and you look and you investigate and you think, why did that happen? And how did that happen? And for what purpose? Because everything happens for a reason. And it's a good thing that we can't change the records. It's a good thing that we can't go back and just change the plot, because then we would never move forward. We would all be stuck in the past trying to constantly write the perfect story. And there is no such thing as that. It's no fun. It's boring. That's why the Garden of Eden had to be destroyed, because it was boring.
Let's just hang out in perfection. Yeah.
Nobody ate any other animals. There was no hunt. It was just like lazy town.
Nobody was even aware that they were naked.
I bet bees weren't even pollinating. They weren't letting the flowers have sex. It was just, everything was as it was.
Well, it sounds like it's a really boring game of The Sims, right? Like if you don't set the house on fire every once in a while, it's just like, why are you even playing?
God, that's terrible. That's such a Collie thing to say.
Well,
such a Collie thing to say.
Well, she's been present.
Yeah. I've been very enmeshed in the world of the story of the Lion King because of a certain 2-year-old. And one thing that Rafiki says every single day in my house, because we watch it every day in my house, is yes, the past can hurt, but it is up to you to choose what to do with it. You can either learn from it or you can run from it, and you'll spend your whole life running. And so that's why we look at the Akashic Records. That's why we do past life regressions. That's why we get so fascinated to find out where we were before, because we don't want to make the same mistake again. We want to stop running. Karma is running on that hamster wheel.
Yeah, I definitely want to get a little update on what's going on in the stars, because you're going to know that, right? I mean, you've been paying attention. But I want to say too, last night, Lindsay and I did a session on the table, and she's very much an energy worker. She's not a massage therapist. She hasn't been trained in Reiki, but she is powerful at holding space. And so we decided to do a session last night, and it was a very earthy day yesterday. Like, it was a absolutely gorgeous day. We went for a nice hike. I got up in the morning. I did imbibe in a little plant medicine, said a little prayer to Shiva, and spent some time in the dirt, literally by the tree, in my backyard. And it's been so lush. Like, all of the snow is melted. It's like 60, 70 degrees in Boulder right now. And I set up an altar. There's a lot of shells and a lot of rocks and branches in the backyard. And I just spent an hour in the dirt with my hands pushing into the dirt, and just, very much giving gratitude for the earth, for mother in general, for being here and giving us a place to play. And so the session that we did, I was very present, which is how earth is. You're very, very, very here. But I had a flood of memories that came up, and that I was able to clear, of stuff that I have not thought about in ages. Like, it was literally 20 years ago that this stuff happened. Part of it too, one of my friend's birthdays was Friday, and we got on it ended up being like a 3-hour Zoom call where just a bunch of my buddies and I were just sitting chatting, talking about the old times and kind of discussing where we were. And so I had a lot of this stuff come up that wasn't really even related to them. It was just back to back. It was like something would come up of a mistake that I had made, or something had come up with something that I had been holding on to and not forgiven myself, or, something where I had wronged someone. It was like, it wasn't super emotional. I didn't have an emotional connection to it, but all of this stuff came up and cleared. And I have a tendency a lot of the times with clients on the table to try to get them into a verbal process, and Lindsay as well, as a clinical,
because you're an air sign.
Yeah,
and she's
an air sign. Yeah, as a clinical therapist, also will, or as a licensed professional counselor, will get people to kind of talk through their thing, because that is, again, how she processes. And she dropped a couple of chances for me to speak, and since I didn't kind of bite at the hook, she just kind of let me do my thing, which I was incredibly grateful for. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is, a lot of this karmic stuff that we have, that we're holding on to, it's good to face it. It's good to move through it. It doesn't mean you have to dwell on it. So coming back to facing stuff in ceremony, or having these things that we know are going to come up because we've done them in our lives, it can hurt. It doesn't have to, though. You've already been there. You've done that. The thorn is out of your paw. You're aware of where you were and how you got to where you are. And yeah, there's a possibility that you may have to make amends to some people if you're wanting to do that. You don't necessarily have to. I don't believe in the 12 steps, but if you want to,
well, you can do it in a non-literal way.
Right. Well, yeah, for yourself, even if it's just kind of you clearing it for yourself. But being able to face things that are there, I think is, again, that's empowering. Like, you're getting to reclaim that thing that you left behind, where you're like, I'm not going to look at that. I don't want to pay attention to it. I don't want to think about it. It's going to feel a lot better if you do. It really is. And it doesn't have to be something, again, that you dwell on. Like, it's already happened. It doesn't matter. It's in the past, just like Rafiki said, right?
The past can hurt, but it's in the past.
Yeah.
And you can't change it, and you can't stop it, and you can't go back and try and fix it, because then you would never go forward. You would never live. And we, what's the one from Kung Fu Panda? I'm just all kids movies today. When the turtle looks at Po, and he says, yesterday is history and tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift, and that's why we call it the present.
Oh.
And it's true. We forget that the Akashic field is happening now. It's all happening now. And we're in the process of creation. We're watching the universe be created. And it's really fascinating. Like, and you mentioned the astrology. Every astrologer is like, oh, 2020. Like, all through 2019, people were just really happy to be done with 2018. And now they're all saying we should write love letters to 2019, apologizing for how much we spat on it, because 2020, wow. But a lot of the astrologers that I follow on social, that I get their newsletters, all they could talk about was something's coming in 2020. Something's coming in 2020. It's going to change. It's going to shift. Something big is happening. And nobody could put their finger on exactly what it was, because one, we don't want to think the worst. Two, we're scared to be called like Apocalypse Now fans. And three, we don't want to scare people, right? We
Right.
don't want to look at the aspects that are happening with planets, and that's how the planets line up in a cool geometric way. You don't want to look at them and say like, oh my God, this is big, because a lot of people tend to get scared. They tend to go immediately to the fear, as opposed to the joy that comes through change. A lot of people are afraid of change. Usually you have to be a mutable sign or have a lot of certain things in your chart to have a temperament and a personality that naturally embraces, like, just burn it to the ground. Let's start over. There's like a certain mix of elements that creates that chemical imbalance in your brain where you're just like, I'm done. Peace. I'm happy with a new planet. So most people didn't know, but they knew because of Pluto in Capricorn, Uranus in Taurus. Those two planets are like the big changers, in the sense that Uranus is the planet of change and Pluto is the planet of death and transformation. So,
and they're in the cardinal sign of Capricorn.
and Taurus.
Mm-hmm.
So Pluto in Capricorn, it's like all of the business structures, all of the corporate structures, all of the way that we work, and everything is shutting down. He's like, done, you're done. Death of everything you know.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason the stock market is like on the verge of not knowing what to do with itself, because he's still sitting there. And guess who joined him? Mars. Mars is like, hi, let's throw some matches on the fire, shall we? And Pluto's just rubbing his hands together like, I love you, bro. I love you so much. Let's do it. And Saturn's like, y'all are too young for me. I'm going to peace and go into the sign of change. He's going into Aquarius. And he's going to come back into Capricorn. He's going to knock on that door and say, like, hey, can I come back into this conference room? Because you didn't clean up your mess. And he's going to do that later this year. And so everybody who has a Saturn return in Capricorn, they're feeling a breath of air for a moment because he's in an air sign. He's in Aquarius. He's not done yet. There's going to be more change. And it's going to be good. It's a good thing. And then you also have Uranus and Taurus. And Uranus is like, I like chaos. I like breaking and entering into your reality and showing you that your reality is not real. And it's not safe to believe that it is. Like, your reality is something that you have to step out of for a moment to look at how it's functioning, because it's not functioning well.
Mm-hmm.
And in Taurus, that's another house of finance and what you value and what you hold dear, and all of the things that come with comfort and shelter and safety and security. And so, like, all of these planets are doing these huge, big jumps and leaps and bounds in terms of the collective consciousness, because of what they call the transpersonal planets. When you get past Jupiter, it's all of these things that affect us on a global scale, not just a personal scale. It's how we interact with each other as a community. We're having to redefine what community is, redefine what it means to be together, what it means to talk to each other, what it means to have a business, to have a family, to have a home, to have a
financial
village.
stability.
Yeah, all of it, literally all of it is coming into question this year. Uranus is asking us, like, what do you value more? Your family and your home, or your finances? There's a zinger. Pluto's asking us, what do you value more? Your ability to control other people in order to gain money, or your ability to transform your life by actually getting to know yourself and serving people through the business you're doing? And there's so many levels to all of it. But if that's all just really confusing and you're like, I'm going to have to take an astrology class from you, Amy, I'm planning on being one of Deborah's mentors in the future. I will let you all know when that happens, because I love this stuff, because you just can't make it up.
Yeah.
You
And that
can't make it up.
and that takes the podcast into the conspiracy turn of how many people have actually been paying attention to this, and this whole like shift in the way that we're doing finances and everything else. Has this been
Mhm.
planned? Has this been structured? Are we going to shift to a one world currency? You know, like the whole idea of cash completely going away. That was something that was kind of broached in the late '90s, early 2000s too, with everybody being chipped and the idea of like your currency being on the chip and you having to kind
That's
of play by the
terrifying.
rules. It is absolutely terrifying.
So
So let's
terrifying.
not
I
go
I
there.
wanted to go the other way. I wanted to go to the point of barter system again, where you're like, I see your 2 rations of batteries, and I have a goat. And can we trade?
Yeah, let's talk. Let's make a
Like,
deal.
I honestly, I understand the value and the lessons of money as an entity and a being, giving us so many beautiful lessons, but I honestly really hope that she's just tired of that and wants to go back to being in the heavens again for a little while, just for a
Right.
break. It gives us the chance to go back to really figuring out what we value ourselves. Like, how much do I value learning how to do a task versus paying someone else to do the task for me?
Right.
And just all of those things. Everybody's getting really obsessed with ancestor skills. I've seen so many people who are like, I just started knitting now. I just started gardening now. I just started learning how to carve wood. There's like all of these things that we've lost as a society that we used to value so highly. They were artisans. They weren't just, I mean, they were craftsmen. They were these very talented, skilled individuals in trade that has become mechanized. And I think we're starting to value humans again. And I
Hmm.
hope that that's the outcome of this, is that we switch from valuing fast and industrialized things to slow human hands creating things that are long term, not one time use things.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think humanity is going to be here no matter what. You know, it's like in the times where things have been majorly shaken up and, you know, population has gotten down to like the thousands, literally thousands of people on the planet.
Yeah.
We've been able to kind of pull through. You know, we've come back around. The planet, I think, is going to be fine. That's something that's been beautiful, seeing like how much the ecosystems around where humans are living are actually being able to kind of shift back to nature. Just in the time where people haven't been driving, the skies are clearer, the waterways are getting less polluted. They're not completely clear, but just like in the past month of people not traveling as much and us figuring out other ways to actually connect with community, it's like it's been really positive. I honestly think
I
like it
mean,
was a
I'm like,
strange
yeah, I'm
transition.
so happy at the idea of all of the communication systems going offline. I know it's a weird thing to say as I'm creating a podcast. But maybe I'll learn how to psychically broadcast it to everybody who has a Lemurian crystal in their hands. That, to me, that's where we should be headed. That's where we should be dreaming of, is taking out all of the middlemen in all of the ways, like all of the in-betweens, and being able to psychically connect and have a phone call by, like, sending out a signal to your friend through your brain saying, hey, you free to chat right now?
Yeah.
And just be able to use all of our brains. We don't use all of our brains, and there's a reason. Like, they stopped us from using all of our brains. Conspiracy theories, but also truth. All this disclosure stuff is happening too, about like what's happening behind the scenes, and I don't want to be the one to tell you if you don't know, because I feel like that's something you have to really search out yourself in order to believe it, because people like Q have been doing it for a long time, and I have my own ish with him on certain things, but I do think he's doing one really great job of showing people that there's way more to the scene that they don't know. I don't agree with everything he says, but I don't think you should agree with everything I say. I don't think you should agree with everything that Starhawk says. Even I revere her and love her and think she's a wonderful woman, and I love watching her drum, but I I have to question everything just a little bit, because I don't want to fall into the trap of dogma or cult or utter devotion to something that is outside of myself.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Well, I mean, we are almost at the hour mark, which I think is I'm totally cool with going over if you want to, but I do want to
That'd
say
be
I
good to know.
think for either if we could talk about it now or next week, talking just about self empowerment. Again, another one of the things that Lindsay and I were talking about the other day was clair senses in general, and how
Mhm.
we all are naturally attuned to some sort of clair sense. So if you don't know what that means, like if you are clairvoyant, that means that you have clear vision, you have clear sight, you see things. If you are clairaudient, you may hear things. You know, you can sense things, or maybe you hear voices. Literally, you know, that's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean you need to be locked up. It may
No,
be that
not
that is how.
always a bad
Yeah,
thing.
well, you know, just
Sometimes a bad
I
thing.
again, one of the things that Thomas Ashley Farron says is, if you hear voices, test them. So
Yes.
see what their
Amen.
goal is. Yeah, see what their intention is, and also if they're telling you how great and wonderful you are, it's probably not somebody you want to deal with. If they're telling you that you're awesome, it's just like anybody on Instagram, right? You know, if somebody
I
has
always
nothing
do
but positive things to say about you.
do the Hobbit test. Okay, if you haven't seen the Fellowship of the Ring yet, were you living under a rock? But also, um, the way that they figured out if Aragorn, when he appeared to them as Strider, was good or not, and they're like, "Are you sure he's not working for the enemy?" And it's Frodo who says it, right?
Mm-hmm. I think
That
that the enemy would look
look
fairer
fairer
and
and
seem.
smell fouler.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to appear enticing and sound wonderful. And this is the devil card in the tarot. It's everything you want to hear,
Mm-hmm.
everything that makes you feel comfortable. You shouldn't feel comfortable. You should feel challenged. You should feel put into a space of growth, not into a space of complacency.
Well, yeah, and it's the whole idea of actually having to earn their presence. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's like that's one of the reasons that we do the work that we do. You do breath work. You do, you know, my yoga practice is tied completely into my spiritual practice, because as you get into the state where your body can actually handle these energetics, then you're going to have more things that are showing up going, oh, I took notice of the stuff that you're doing over here. So let me see if I can help you on your path. You know, part of that too is actually being able to, and we kind of talked about this on the chakra episode, clearing out those channels so that we are able to take that energy in. Whether
Right.
if you're looking at it from the angelic realm, the higher angels, you know, they have, and I may have mentioned this before, but they have like the images of them, or people, the images that people see. They have one, you know, a wing that covers their hands. It's a wing that covers their feet, wings that cover their eyes and their mouth, because those are where energy comes out and goes in. And
Mm-hmm.
if you see the light that's coming out of that, it can blind you.
Yeah.
The things that take in light or take in energy in our bodies would not be able to handle it. You know, if you've ever seen the movie Dogma by Kevin Smith, the whole idea that the voice of God is so powerful that it can't be heard, that there's an angel that actually does the speaking for God.
Yeah.
You know, when Alanis Morissette shows up at the end of the movie and she opens her mouth and blows up Ben Affleck's head, you know, it's the ability to actually be able to receive the signal. And again, that comes into what the work is that we're doing. The reason why you go into shadow work is to test your boundaries. You go into the shadow so that you can go further into the light. There's this constant spectrum that you're working inside of, and you want to be able to.
Your light shines,
Right.
the further you can see of where you need to work.
Right. Yeah, and it's going to open you up past what your structure is for your day of getting up in the morning and going to work. So again, I think this is, it's testing us on a societal level, like the quarantine that we're currently in, and trying to refigure what it is that you do with your day, how it is that you can still be productive and survive. You know, again, living in places, if you live in LA or New York, or, you know, Boulder has really high rent as well, like being able to figure out a way to still survive, and be able to grow through that. You know, with everybody kind of having the situation now, it's like, what have I been doing with my life? You know, a lot of people are kind of questioning what they've been doing with their time and what they actually do with their free time. And I know for me too, like I said, there's a lot of darkness that I'm having to go into and kind of deal with. It's not necessarily fun, but it's like, oh, good, I can sort this out. I can do some spring cleaning on my life, you know?
Right.
What were you going to say?
I'm like got my fingers crossed that everybody turns into a bunch of Walter Mitties and decides to actually just go live their life instead of living the stories in their minds,
Mm-hmm.
instead of watching Netflix all day because now they can, deciding to live those stories. And I know for now, most people can't actually, jump on a plane and go to Greenland and then jump in a helicopter and fall into the ocean.
It's not a porpoise.
It's not a porpoise. It's not a porpoise. Stay gold, pony boy. Oh man, I love that movie so much, and it came out when I started living. I think is why it has such a sweet place in my heart. I went to go see it with one of my very dearest best friends in the whole wide world, and she and I met in kindergarten, and we were watching it, and I just had this feeling of like, oh my God, we're both in this stage now where we get to choose. We get to choose whether we just go sit down at the desk and do what we're supposed to do, or not.
Right.
And I was like, I pick or not. Ayahuasca. Like I was driving to Joshua Tree, and I had flown to like Scotland the year before, and it had triggered a lot of like memories that I couldn't explain. I knew I'd been there, and I was loving my life so wholeheartedly in a way I had never done before. And I think that's the key. If you're unhappy with your situation, first, thank yourself for getting yourself there, because that means you're learning lessons. Second, congratulate yourself, pat yourself on the back for manifesting your secret unfulfilled desire of whatever it is. The fun kind of torture that God invented for you. Because honestly, that's something my teacher, Carolyn Elliott, always says. She's like, you made this. You got here on purpose. It wasn't an accident. This is something that you wanted inside that you could not say verbally. And so it happened so that you would experience it. And until you acknowledge that you succeeded in this magical act of creating the life you're currently in, you will never get past it. The karma lesson will keep coming back around and around and around. And I feel like so many people are really being confronted with that karma lesson right now. And so many people, as a result, are seeking something beyond their normalness, because nothing's normal anymore. And I think it really does take a certain level of fear to push people into a space where they are interested in things that they can't see.
Well, I mean, we're definitely in a point of quiet desperation, right? Like we're not, you go out in public and you have to have 6 feet between you and another person. Like a lot of people, when I've gone out, are not talking, so you really are having to do a lot. People are doing a lot of reflecting. And again, I think that's like, what are you listening to? Because if you're listening to your soul, if you're listening to where, if you're going back and you're reliving, like I was last night, some of the stuff from your past, and seeing like, these were the places where I wasn't, completely the person that I thought I was, or these, I'm not completely living in fair exchange with certain people in my life, or with my career, or with my kids. A lot of people are spending a lot of time with their kids, and I think they're seeing, exactly what their parenting style has led their kids to. Right. So, which is definitely not problematic. It's a good thing. These are the entities that you brought onto this planet. Like, spend some time with them. See where they are now as human beings.
Because they show you patterns faster than anything else.
Yeah, for real. For real.
I heard Blue use a swear word when I said that he wasn't allowed to have another tortilla.
Yeah.
I was like, oh darn. He heard me say that. That was me. That was, oh gosh. And there was this moment where I could see, it was just like, he was so disappointed. He was so mad. And I said, you have to eat the veggies first, hon. You just you just can't. You have to have another bite of your greens and another bite of your meat before you get another piece of tortilla. And he was trying to climb the fridge to get to where I had put it. I sat down and just quietly mumbled, fuck. Oh no.
You're like, let me go ahead and give you props for using that in the correct context.
Right. But it was this complete give up. I'm gonna say what it needs to be said. And I just didn't even acknowledge it. I was just like, I'm sorry about the tortillas. I'm sorry. And there was this feeling of I use food to in ways that I shouldn't. I still reward myself, and I still punish myself, and I still do things with food based off of my emotional state. And it's not healthy. And he's picking up on it because he's bored. So he wants to snack all the time. And he's also growing. So he wants to snack all the time. So that basically means the second he's done with breakfast, he wants to eat a snack. And the second he's done with a snack, he wants to eat a snack. And the second he's done with that snack, he wants to eat lunch. It's like, you can't just keep eating because there's nothing else to do.
Conversations with myself.
Yeah, I'm like walking over to the fridge thinking, what else can I eat right now? And it's because we are home more, so therefore it's there more.
Yeah, and fill the void, right? I mean, that's
right.
Like, you want to feel something, you want to feel like you have some type of control. I am definitely guilty of that. Lindsay, again, I'm going to keep on talking about my current situation. Before she went into session today, because she had Sundays are a big day for her, I like cooked lunch, and she was like, "Why do you always try to bring me food?" And I was like, "Because I'm from the South, and that's how we comfort people." You know, like that's one of the things that I know that I can control, because the kitchen that's a place of solace, you know. And it's like, you're going to be just like when I eat, I'm going to be happy for at least the 45 seconds while the piece of chocolate or whatever is in my mouth, you know. So,
which is also not healthy. So we're having to confront those patterns. And so I think it's so good to put those restraints on ourselves the second we see our kids doing something. The second the child asks, "I want to watch this TV show." Well, how about we go outside instead? Well, I just would rather watch the TV show. Well, I'm just going to put the TV in the garage then. We won't watch it for next week. Okay, I'll go outside and play. And me feeling the same way of like, I've cleaned the house. I've done my astrology homework. I've listened to like the third podcast this week, and I can't handle any more in my brain. I just want to sit down and watch Gilmore Girls. And I think I am teaching them that it's like fine to just check out.
Just numb out. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, no, don't do that. And I'll grab something else. I'll do something creative with my hands, whether that's knitting or making a crown or going outside and drawing with chalk with them. Or maybe building blocks and knocking them over, or pulling out a puzzle, like trying to do something that is still relaxing, but meditative, as opposed to numbing out.
Yeah. I had something that came up today on my Instagram feed that said, stressing it or hating your job is stress. Now I'm going to completely butcher it. I interrupted you just so that I could completely fuck up the thing that I saw today. It said, stress can be equated to hating your job, whereas passion is equated to loving your job. Something along those lines. It's like the difference between like stressing about going to work and working your ass off and hating what you're doing is going to kind of show up in your life in a stressful way, and being passionate about something and killing yourself doing that's what your goal is, right? We all want to have a job that we love so much that we get so riled up about, but we're doing it because it feels good for it to be perfect, or it feels good for us to, to be working towards that goal, as opposed
with
to
the line of not becoming a workaholic because we're running away from our personal life.
Well, I mean, I was going to say the same thing. You're talking about like, when you have downtime, you don't want to turn to television, but I mean, I have my own way of spiritual bypass, which is picking up a book on, magic or esotericism and spending time in that, as opposed to doing the things that I need to do, like looking for a job or, setting up clients, whatever the thing is, working on putting things out for the business. Like there's these other things that I do, which would be helpful for in the long run, for building of the business, but it's not in the here and now. It's something that I really need. It's my chores technically, I would rather wash the dishes than do the other thing,
Well, this is a procrastinating pattern,
right?
That a lot of people have, and I've had clients who have dealt with it, and they're like, how do we work around this in a magical way? And it's almost like you're building what's the word? It's almost like you're getting gold stars from the universe every time you accomplish a task, that you will get a reward when you complete that row. Like when you're in elementary school and your teacher has those charts where everybody's name's on the class, and every book that you read, you get a little star or happy face or something. And when you get to the end of the row, you get something, whether it's like 1 hour of free time to do whatever you wish in the class, or you get to have double recess, or just like little rewards. That's what I did too, where I was like, okay, there's these 2 things that you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's 10 things that you have to do. And one of these 10 things you really don't want to do, and it keeps getting pushed to the bottom of your list. Well, if you can complete that thing, then you'll have way more time for the 2 things you want to do, as opposed to feeling guilty while you're doing the 2 things that you want to do instead of the 10 things you have to do that are glaring you in the face.
Right.
And so if you can at least get, 2 or 3 of those other things that you don't want to do, but that you have to do, out of the way, you get to enjoy the wants so much more. And our society isn't built for delayed gratification. And that's what it is.
Yeah.
We want to gratify ourselves immediately. It's like we want to have the chocolate before we have dinner as opposed to after. And being able to wait and learn, again, that's a food reward, and I need to step away from that. But okay, I want to be able to sit down and read a book on spirituality, because this was your example, right? But you have to answer a couple of emails, and you have to send out a resume, and you have to post on social media. And like all of those things have to get done by a certain point that day. But that chapter was so good. That chapter. Well, if you start reading that chapter, then you'll feel really guilty later when the day is over and you don't have literally the energy to do it. Right. But like you said, with passion gives you that fuel. So if you can use the energy that you start the day with to get the things done that you have to do, then that passion will reignite you. It will fuel you from the inside. And then you're tapping into the 3 lower chakras in a way that a lot of people don't realize are crucial for a foundational magical practice, where you're satisfying the root chakra and starting everything with, okay, I took care of everything I had to do.
Right.
And now I'm going to move into the relationship aspect. I'm going to answer those emails. I'm going to engage with these people. And then stepping into, okay, this is what I want to do. This is what's interesting, because it opens up the top 4.
And the great thing about that too is once it gets to a point where your 2-hour chunk that you've designated to yourself after you've done the other things that you have to do, if that 2-hour chunk continues to grow and grow and grow, and then that starts to bring in money or bring in some other type of abundance, then you can transition that into the thing that is your root, right? So you have to get up in the morning, and you have to record music. Again, that's another thing. It's like, I've got all this time and I'm recording a new song, but because I'm only one person, I have to record every piece by piece. So that's a big challenge for me to go, I really want to hear this entire song that I hear in my head, but I've got to lay down, 32 or 40 tracks so that I can actually put it into an edit to make the song. Well, that seems like work, because I'm looking at it from the end goal standpoint, as opposed to get these things done and then you get to go and record for 2 hours,
Right. You eat an elephant piece by piece. You don't try to swallow it whole.
I would never eat an elephant. I mean, I tried to do the same thing.
Never say never. What if you were in India, it was the only animal left and you had to eat?
I would respect the animal, and I would say, elephant, you and me, we've spent some time together in ceremony. Roll Tide. I got to just throw that out there as well. What up, Ganesha? Hey, hey.
And I would say, I need a new head.
Okay. If that's what you want to say.
Carnivore.
That's true. Yeah.
Also, I love that we're bringing it back to this idea of practical magic, because I think that's something a lot of people don't. They love the movie and they love the phrase, but they don't realize what it is. And this is practical magic. It's if you have a to-do list, taking care of your to-do list before you do the esoteric things. Or if all you ever do is your to-do list and you never get to the esoteric, putting the esoteric at the top of your to-do list.
Right.
Combining the two. So if you're always like, oh, I always want to meditate, but I have to do these other things instead. Well, then you schedule yourself a 15-minute meditation in the middle of those other things. And you set an alarm and, oh, I have an appointment. I'm sorry. And you step out and you have an appointment with yourself. You have an appointment with God. You have an appointment with your guides and your guardians and maybe a shaman even, and like get on a call with them. Being in a space where you acknowledge your strengths and your weaknesses. And is your strength the woo? Is it like, I could draw tarot cards all day long, I could read about astrology all day long, I could go down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories on aliens all day long, but it would be really hard for me to actually like deal with very practical bookkeeping. I just
Right.
don't like spreadsheets. And so like maybe I should take an hour of my day to designate that time to the practicalness, because then I'm satisfying the root chakra, and you're only as spiritual as you are grounded. And the more grounded that you get, the more spiritual you can become, because your roots become stronger, so your tree can grow taller.
Right. I think that Blue taught you this lesson earlier when he said, I want to eat that tortilla. And you said, you have to eat your Brussels sprouts or whatever you're eating first. Because literally that's what it is, right?
Greens.
Yeah. So sometimes you got to eat the things that you know are good for you. And that's
something I'm working on right now. I'm making sure I have like my groups of fermented, that I'm minimizing my protein, I'm upping my fat intake, I'm making sure I have a variety of greens that I'm engaging in. It's like I'm trying to shift and be the example for the kids. And that's another practical magic thing of like, I'm doing it for them. And if it's easier for me to do it for them than it is for myself, well then great, at least I'm doing it.
well, I think that's again, right now I'm listening to Secrets of Self-Mastery by Mitch Horowitz. And he was saying that when it comes to leadership, being willing to do things that other people aren't, and also being being prepared to kind of take the lead without somebody asking you to. That is literally what being a leader is. Like, people who want to have a leadership role because of the power that comes along with it, that's not the reason why you're doing it. Some people are good leaders. Before the Avengers movie came out, I used to think that Captain America was like the goofiest character ever. But like, being able to see the way that they wrote the character and the way that he was played by Chris Evans in the movie was literally, this is my job. My job is to be the person who says, I'm going to look at the structure of everybody else's strengths and then kind of give them an idea of which way to go. And I think in our culture too, we don't really look at leaders that way. We look at leaders as the person who's untouchable, who's got a lot of spray tan on his face with a really bad haircut. And it's like,
well, I don't count that as a leader.
I know, but still, I mean, that's how we look at dictatorships. We look at our current our political structure is, and we look at it from that standpoint, because those are the people who have claimed power and said that they don't want to give it up. It's that whole Caesar idea, right? He's like, I kind of want to keep doing this, and it's like, that's not how this works. The person who has the best vision for the entire group is the person who needs to be in charge. So when you're doing something to better yourself, as influencers, as people who are on social media, really that's technically what your job is, right? Is to be able to kind of show people, and not do it in an egocentric way either, but to show people how that they can live their best life. That's what a good teacher does. That's what a good leader does. It's like leading by example.
While still being human, though.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's so many times where I'm like, I don't want to post today because I'm not having a good day. And I'm like, no, I need to post today because I'm not having a good day.
Mm-hmm.
And I fall prey to the pedestal syndrome frequently with teachers, where I see and value their knowledge and their experience and what they are doing for humanity in terms of like up-leveling the consciousness. And then they end up on a pedestal in my mind without me consciously putting them there, because I respect them, but I also expect them to maintain that all the time.
Right.
And they're human, and they have to be allowed to climb down off the pedestal. And I think a lot of people do that in general with leaders, where if a leader messes up once, then they suddenly become pariahs.
Right.
And I do think that there's a lot of times where, and this is the conspiracy thing, leaders that we have currently actually are really awful, or are really secretly working for other goals that the general populace doesn't understand. And so they're perceived as awful, but then they're not. There's so many layers and layers and layers of who's really in charge. But we have a lot of people in positions of power in our world who aren't leading by example. They're leading by image.
Right.
And that's dangerous. And I think it's all starting to crumble right now with the way that the planets are aligning in a really useful and beneficial and hopeful way. It's a hope that we come back to the truth. It's a hope that we come back to a space of I'm not just living my best life. I'm living the best way I can consciously.
There are two things that can't be hidden long: the truth and the moon, or maybe it's the moon and the truth. But yeah, like it's always going to be there. You know, it's always kind of staring us in the face. I think
Death and taxes.
Yeah. There's I again, this is kind of like coming back into the whole cosmic idea. I'm hoping that the tangents that I continue to go off on are at least kind of directional. But coming back to what I was asking about with the clairsenses and that type of thing, do you feel like our transition through Kali Yuga and coming back around on the precession of the equinox, do you feel like that's one of the reasons we're able to kind of tap into more of this, and that's one of the reasons people are a little more open to the stuff that you and I are really into and the stuff that we're talking about now?
Oh yeah, 100%. There's so in Graham Hancock's book Underworld, he talks about the yugas in a really easy to digest way if you are used to that level of scholarship, because he actually is takes quite amount of focus to read it. For most people. For me, I devour it. I love I think he's very clear spoken and well researched. And there's another book. I was actually looking for it when you mentioned the yugas earlier, that I haven't gone through all the way, but it's in my library. What's it called? And the yugas, keys to understanding our book details. Hold on, it's cut off on the screen. Keys to understanding our hidden past, emerging energy age, and enlightened future. And it has a really great drawing of the yuga system. And so a lot of times we hear, okay, each yuga is this long. There's like, it's this long and this long and this long. And there's these insanely long numbers that go with that. And that's like the yuga of the universe. Mm-hmm. It's not just the yuga of where we are right now. And where we are right now, it's a 24,000 year cycle in total. And when we kind of look back at some of the numbers that Graham matches up with Ice Age and like the Sphinx dating with geologists and all of that, it really matches what these other people are saying in terms of the Vedas being divided up. The yugas listed within the Vedas being divided up in smaller chunks. Like, so there's smaller cycles within the bigger cycles, within the bigger cycles.
A wheel within a wheel?
Yeah. And so this one, it's shown really beautifully how there's a descending cycle and an ascending cycle. And Satya is the highest yuga, right? That means truth. It's where we all want to go. And when we're all living in truth, and we're all close to Eden, I would say. Like close to Shambhala and all of these mythical, wonderful lands of perpetual wonderfulness. And then Treta Yuga is the next one up, and that's when everybody has psychic powers, thinking of Atlantis, of Lemuria, of these revered civilizations that imparted great knowledge and that laid the foundations for the pyramids that would be built. And then we have the Dwapara Yuga, and the Dwapara Yuga is basically what we're in according to this cycle. And then the Kali Yuga is centered in that. And the way that this wheel is shown, Treta and Dwapara are divided in half. So they're on either side of the wheel, with Satya and Kali opposite each other. Mm-hmm. And Kali Yuga began, according to them, about the time that the patriarchies really took over in the human civilization system. So once we had like very clear hierarchical, patriarchal, kind of king-based feudal systems and states where there were many, many, many oppressed people and very, very few powerful, wealthy people. That's when the Kali Yuga began. It was the time of the most darkness on the planet. The least amount of people were enlightened. All of the schools had gone into mystery teachings. They had gone into very close-knit, tiny groups of initiates who could not share the secrets. They could not talk about the things we talk about because they would be killed. Because if these secrets got into the hands of the people who were in power, then the whole world would just go to hell, because they would use them for ill, for their own gain, and for the detriment of others. And so they had to protect them. They had to go underground. Thoth and Shizaha had to take them out of physical realms and put them into places where you wouldn't understand them. Like, all of these gods and goddesses had lived on the planet at one point, and they had to protect it, and they had to take it away. And when humanity was ready, they would start imparting the truths again. And Kali Yuga lasted until, according to this mathematical structure that they figured out, and according to Graham too in his book, and that's what made me go look for this other book, was about 1700 AD by our reckoning, which means that when the Age of Enlightenment started, we stepped into the Dwapara Yuga. And the Dwapara Yuga is the Yuga of energy, of electricity, of technology. And that's what happened at that time. That's when people started valuing science over mysteries. Yeah. And when they actually discovered the outer planets using telescopes, when they actually figured out how to harness electricity in order to use it for power, when they started to tap into the industrial age. And it's still not great. It's going to take a while to get out of it and into Treta. I don't think it will happen in our lifetime.
So does it move backwards the way that the precession of the equinox does, or is it, because Kali is winter, correct?
Yes, it's the darkest time. So it's
right.
Like I said, the descending cycle and ascending cycle. So Treta and Dwapara are divided in half. Like, their cycles aren't grouped together. So it's not like you have a constant group of 4 that you're cycling through. You have, it's not like Satya is next to Kali.
Right.
It goes Satya, Treta, Dwapara, Kali, Kali, Dwapara, Treta, Satya.
Right. And
back around again. So it's the idea that we're basically moving into spring.
It's very Game of Thrones. Like, it's going so far out into winter, and then it has to technically go back through autumn before it can go through spring again.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like, spring and summer are like at the top, and then autumn is on either side of winter.
Jeez. Yeah, and the complete Yuga revolution is 4,320,000 years.
Yeah. And what's weird is, like, when you start looking at some of the Yuga numbers that are really huge like this, they match up with the Mayan long count.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, it makes sense. All of this information was spread across the world at one point.
And the Mayans were some of the most aware of it in their earliest days, because they were handed it by an earlier group. And I mean, Graham makes a million things about that, and other people make other arguments about why they were able to do it. I think that as a people, they were ready to receive the knowledge, but they weren't the ones who invented it. And the Egyptians, as we know them in Egyptology, which Graham is like to that, they also were handed the knowledge, and they were keepers of the knowledge. They weren't the creators of the knowledge. And I think a lot of people have to really come to terms with what that means, because we revere certain civilizations as having figured it out, but then we're like, well, why were they so effed up? Why did they marry their sisters and brothers? And it's because they were the humans interpreting what was being handed to them. They weren't the originators, and the originators are the ones that we now call gods.
So it's like they got the instruction manual, but they didn't really have the game. They're trying to. I
think some of them got the game, but they didn't get the instruction. And like all the pieces were spread all over the planet
Hmm.
after
Yeah.
the deluge.
And that's Babel, right? The whole idea of like language has to be split up so that we can't talk to each other.
Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, we're all just split up right now, period. So, and a lot of people are, I mean, and this is the reason that I think most people are looking at some of these bigger cycles is once we discovered Pluto, it was the 1930s. And in the 1930s, a lot of change was happening. And a lot of things were happening faster than anybody had ever seen them happen before. The science race was massive. Einstein was alive and well and doing insane mathematical calculations on quantum stuff. And there were, for the first time, astrologers were aware of Pluto's movements in a way that changed how they saw history, right? Because now they could go back in an ephemeris and see like, oh, Pluto was here at this point. Pluto was here when when the United States and the people of France threw over their governments.
Right.
when this happened and this happened and like the fall of this country and this happened. Like people will go backwards in time now and they see these huge leaps and bounds in history that were made during these alignments. And it's kind of like, oh, history really does always repeat itself. And Rome was the new Babylon and America's the new Rome. So there's this feeling of as we clear our personal karma, we can start to clear the collective karma, because there's finally enough of us aware of it that something can be done about it. But
Right.
It's taken this long for us to see the pattern, because it takes that long for a civilization to repeat the pattern.
And on that note,
Hope you're not listening to this before you go to bed.
well, I know I am.
Oh my gosh, yeah. There's this. I want everybody to remember. I feel like people are waking up on their own. It's not my job to wake people up. I want to wake people up. I want to shake them and be like, stop sleeping, stop being a sheep. But
No, the good thing about that is it'll slowly grow, and then maybe people will hear the things that we're talking about, and maybe maybe we'll get to meet some of the teachers that can actually teach us some things and speak to them, in person.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful for where we are. It's something that I have to always remind myself of. It's like
I love my life.
Very fortunate, very fortunate to have found the things that we have found that have empowered both of us to get to where we are. And I want to share this as much as with other people as well. But I think there's something about
could you
being
imagine
being able to ask the right questions.
Right.
Like meeting the people who are asking the right questions again, so that you don't get burned at the stake. So it's like there have been times when I've been around large groups of men who are doing a lot of shadow work and a lot of different types of things. And then there are just a couple of guys that'll come up and ask me about my practice, or they'll ask me about the books that I have in the area where I'm doing body work. And it's like, those are the guys who I really want to sit down and have a conversation with, because it's not a passing thing. It's like, oh, this might be something that is going to shift you and trigger you into the next stage in your spiritual evolution.
Yeah. Again, getting back to being gateway drugs.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. What were you going to say?
Bringing it around. I feel like with some of this, there's almost like an urgency in me to do it right, and something that I have to remember with a lot of gratitude is that I am.
Mm-hmm.
And for anybody who feels that same urgency, who's like, I want to get it right this time. I want to clear the karma. I want to elevate the planet. I want to clear the oceans of plastic and take down 5G towers and make sure that nobody's getting crazy radiation from nuclear power plants spilling things. All the big stuff, just a few things. By doing your own work, you are doing it all. You are doing it right. There's no other way that it can be done. Like the people who are in power in terms of being leaders or being teachers even of some of these esoteric things, if they don't continue doing their own work, they're not helping anybody, because they're not going to be able to continue leading. They're not going to be able to continue sharing and teaching. And so I hope that in hearing just me and Jeremy talk now, if you do ever go back and listen, if you become a subscriber on Patreon and you listen to those old episodes, I hope that you see that we have changed. I hope that you see that we have monumentally shifted our perspectives and our values. And I know that if I went back and talked to me this time of year back then, I would just I would be mind boggled at the majority of stuff that came out of my mouth, and at the same time I would be like, yes,
Like
exactly.
you're gonna be okay.
Perfect. Yeah. And it's so good that you can't go back in the past and do that with yourself, because like in Harry Potter, you might accidentally kill yourself if you do the time turner and you don't realize it, and you're like, what are you?
Is that what happened in Harry Potter? I don't remember reading that one.
No, Hermione, sorry, I've been re-listening to them, and in the end of the third book, she's like, Harry, you can't be seen, not just because you can't like confuse people, but because you
might attack yourself.
You might attack yourself because you think it's somebody pretending to be you or whatever, or you might mess something up for yourself and accidentally kill your past or future self and therefore kill yourself. So you cannot be seen. You cannot be seen. You cannot be seen. And like with a lot of this, you cannot see the future right now.
Mm-hmm.
You just can't. And you have to be okay with it, and you have to know and trust. And this is the universe asking us to trust the birthing process right now. And unless you've given birth, it's really hard to 100% understand. Jeremy's seen me give birth, so
literally
saw me give birth. He sang ceremony songs in for my baby, and it was great.
Thanks, Quest.
Yeah, and so did Robert Gardo. His Quest. Oh my gosh, that was amazing. That kid has the coolest birth story. So, but right now we're in a process of going in the stillness, going into the womb. Essentially, the earth has put us on timeout, and we have to stay home, and we don't know what the other side's going to look like. In alchemy, it's solve and coagula. It's dissolving yourself in order to regrow yourself. Butterflies do it. They're some of the only beings on this planet that can completely turn into a puddle of goo inside a cute little chrysalis, and then that goo magically realigns all of its atoms and particles and cells into something that flies. Like before, it was this weird squishy thing that walked along on a lot of legs, and then it becomes something that's like really delicate and sweet and has giant wings. So we don't know what we're turning into right now as a culture or even as individuals, and trusting the process, trusting that everything's exactly where it should be, as it should be.
Yeah, don't be scared of dissolving, because again, you're still going to be there. And even if it's not you, like, we talked a lot about movies tonight. Even if it is, if you're Gandalf the White, you have to be gray, and then you have to die to this world to come to know me, as Jesus said. Like there's all of these ideas of death and rebirth, and we've got.
And it's going to be Easter. This is
so
perfect.
Yeah, we're coming up. We're Palm Sundaying right now, so be willing to go through that cycle of death and rebirth. And if you're if you feel like you're right now and you're still in a winter because it feels pretty crummy, realize that spring is just around the corner, and what you're going to come out as is going to be something awesome and beautiful. It can be. I mean, you can also just kind of hang at your house and continue to watch Netflix. Again, like I said, I'm not gonna question or shame anybody's process, but believe that.
Watch one episode of Gilmore Girls today.
I've been trying to stay away from Netflix. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts and audiobooks as of recently, which still can also, I'm able to multitask, but there's still, there's something about, I don't remember who it was. I think David Goggins said, if you run while you're listening to music, it's cheating, cause it's like, you're again, not processing, you're putting something in your head to distract you as opposed to really being completely there. But, yeah, like again, we started this originally with talking about like how to motivate yourself when you're in this situation, and I
Yeah,
think
how do
that
you motivate yourself away from Netflix?
yeah, well, and this is part of it, like be willing to question and be willing to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation, whether that means finally cleaning that room in your house that has been collecting junk, or if it's sending out those emails that you've been ignoring, or if it's whatever it is that spend a little time in discomfort, spend a little time in comfort, like realize that you don't have to be in any of those places forever. There's
Right.
there has been a lot of there's been a lot of Kali energy around the house as of recently. And again, it's that there have been almost every time I have either gotten a new Kali book, or she has come back around where she's kind of like thinks there's going to be some time we're going to spend together. Something has broken. So I I was leaving with the yoga studio that I used to have one of my private practices in last year, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to get. They had a book on the 100 names of Kali, and so I like sent a Venmo to the owner, and I was like, I'm going to take this book with me. Picked the book up, literally stood up to walk out, and I dropped my oil bottle and broke the handle. It was an oil bottle that I had like it's one for like actual oil in your kitchen, and I used it for massage oil, and I was like, that's Kali for you. So she is big on destruction. She is big on rebirth. She is big on testing your limits when it comes to darkness. One of the things that is not really talked about with working with Kali is the fact that she wants you to be on your game. It's like if you're going to work with her, you literally have to be aware completely of your process, because otherwise things can show up in a way that you didn't expect. And it can almost feel like the tower a lot of the times, where it's like things are falling apart, or you're like, I asked for, Thomas Ashley Ferran talks about it in his book, or in his audiobook, where he says, he was working with Kali where he'd lost his job and he didn't have a lot of money. And he was working with her because he needed a quick turnaround. Well, he was able to either sell his house or sell his business or his stocks that he had, but it was at a much lower amount. So there's an idea of actually being able to, to prepare and plan and be ready in case you have to make a quick transition. And I think Kali kind of teaches you that. It's like, have you been mindful of your crops? Are you going to be able to actually collect on these things and get everything that you need from it? Like, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but again, the Mitch Horowitz book that I'm listening to right now is he said something that I've heard before and that has been very truthful for me, is like, fortune favors the brave, which we all kind of know that. Like if a possibility shows up for you, if you jump on it, you'll be able to hopefully actualize whatever the thing is that you're going for. But he also said that luck favors the prepared. So like if you actually just being prepared and being ready in case that lucky moment arrives for you, like being brave and having fortune kind of present itself to you is nothing if you're not ready for it. So
Right.
That's part of what's going on right now too. So in case something happens where there is a quick transition, be ready. Like, not to get into like the prepper mindset, but like, do you have water? Like that was a big thing over the past couple of weeks with all the runs on the grocery stores, like just having extra jugs of water in the house, because I don't drink tap water. I
Right.
don't like it, so
And
like
we got an AquaTrue. I'm not sponsored by them, but we got it for that reason, because when we went to go refill our waters, the
they'd
machine,
shut it down.
yeah, it wasn't
Yeah.
working. So we were like, we don't drink tap water. What do we do? Also, if you're drinking tap water, stop drinking tap water.
Yeah. I don't want to
Please.
tell you, what to do, but do a taste test, which is something that I did with Lindsay a couple of weeks ago too. I got a bottle of distilled, I got a bottle of purified water, I got water out of the filter. I did not give her tap water. And I said, taste these three and tell me which one tastes
You
the best.
basically get tap water.
Pretty much, yeah. But she was like, this was probably the cleanest tasting one. And I was like, well, that's distilled. Like, I love distilled water. I'm a water snob through and through. I'll drink purified water.
Distilled water doesn't have any minerals in it. You have to add trace minerals.
I get my
Distilled.
minerals from other
Otherwise,
places. I don't need to
no,
get it
but
from my
as you
water.
drink, the water. I could argue this all night long.
I know you could.
Stop
That's
talking.
no, we're not even going to discuss distilled
The
water.
Virgo in me is like, good Lord, don't tell anyone to drink that.
The
Please
Libra in me says, drink whatever the hell you want. This is also a person who used to drink a thing called a dirty scotch, which was scotch with olive juice in it. So
Oh my
don't
God.
listen to me. By God, don't listen to anything I say.
Don't listen to you. This is terrible health advice.
It was
Always turn to the Virgo.
Yeah.
Take Thrive probiotics. Drink reverse osmosis using purified water with trace minerals by Constant Trace Minerals added back into it as you take the Just Thrive probiotic pill. Use the water. Very good sources.
not
For
sponsored
lots
by
of
any of these
reasons.
companies. Not sponsored
Not
at all.
sponsored.
Yeah. Just personal preference.
Highly obsessive with human health. Also take liver supplements from Ancestral Supplements. Because it has the only pure source of vitamin A. Beta carotene cannot be converted into retinol in your body. Just saying.
Okay. So do we even want to throw out a mantra for today, or do we want to just kind of end on all of these positive good vibes and health advice that we've got?
Oh my God. I could yell at people about health.
That's really the best way to
not
get through to
talk to
people
them.
too. No, yeah, you want to yell at them, yeah. And that's the best way to get subscribers too, is just really yell at people. It worked for well, most of the news companies for the longest time. I don't know if it's still doing a thing.
I'm going to throw books at your head until your head absorbs the book. Right? That's how osmosis works. I'm just going to keep hitting you on the head with the book.
Is that osmosis? I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah, sleep with the book underneath your pillow. You'll clearly remember it the next morning. I had a drama, like a theater teacher tell me that once. She was like, sleep with your script under your pillow. You'll remember it better the next day. It's like, I'll try anything.
I feel like I would get paper cuts and it would definitely end up pretty messed up. I'd end up not having the first 3 pages. That was something that I do want to say. Again, I know that this episode has been rather tangential and we are at almost a 2-hour mark. But actually, yeah. So, but I want to say something has been kind of repeating in my head the past couple of weeks, which is creativity and memory. And I think that, again, in this time that we're in, that is 2 things that we can work on, and it's something that we have gotten really bad about. So when it comes to magic in general, again, we talked about focus a couple of weeks ago. Creativity is another big part of magic, because being able to visualize anything, whether you're trying to manifest something or trying to visualize an angel or trying to visualize, any of the gods or goddesses that are in the Hindu pantheon, the reason why you have a yantra, the reason why you have these images of the gods or goddesses like Lakshmi holding, whatever she's holding, is so that you have that image in your mind so that you can picture that abundance or that source being manifest. So imagining them being alive or in human form. Memory is also a big thing. And this also comes back to setting an intention, right? Like, you have to be able to remember that you set the intention. This is also the idea of luck favoring the prepared and fortune favoring the brave. Like, if you set an intention, you start to kind of work on manifesting something and you forget about it. When the thing presents itself to you, you may have forgotten completely that you had put that out there in the universe, and it's really important to do that. So being able to visualize the thing, I think we've talked about this before too, like not necessarily obsessing over it, but being able to at least picture it, at least daily. And then being able to remember the fact that you're picturing that and that it's something you're setting your goals for. Like you also said, we're not a great society when it comes to delayed gratification. And that is something that we really should get better at, because there's a long game that's being played in our lives in general when it comes to planning. My mom mentioned the other day, my partner and I are going to be moving out of our house in a couple of months. And she was like, I was talking about rent, and she was like, why don't you buy a house? And I really, for the first time in my adult life, I was actually like, I actually could buy a house. Again, it's not something that I've ever wanted to do. It just doesn't seem feasible. But I was like, that is actually something that I could do. My mom is a woman who has been kind of manifesting her entire life, honestly. Like, she got married at a very young age. She had my brother at a young age. She has owned every house that she's lived in since she was like 18 years old. She's whenever she's needed a new car, it's always been a used car that she's bought, but she's, able to kind of take care of that. She's also a Taurus. She's got that earth sign thing in her
Oh,
to be able to
yeah.
kind of plan ahead and to set those types of intentions. And again, that's one of those, it's a lesson that I keep coming back to in my life of like being able to not feel bound by being grounded, like not feeling like it closes off the possibilities
That's
of
the air sign.
I know. Well, I've got Cap rising again. Like I feel like I'm finally getting to the point where I'm starting to respect the Capricorn side of my life of wanting to set some longer term goals,
Which, I mean, I love that. We can talk forever. And that's totally another podcast, that your rising sign
Right.
is what you're rising towards.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the goal of your soul essence. Is your sun sign is the personality you come in with, and your rising sign is what you're usually exhibiting as a child, because your childlike self is way more in touch with your soul. And then the more that your personality develops, then the further away you move from that, and you have to move back towards it in your lifetime. But then you have to be able to remember what it is, right? So memory and concentration is their
Mm-hmm.
mantra beyond Sarasvati last week, or the Om Aim Shrim Klim Sa Sachit Ekam Brahma.
Mantras for memory. See, now we didn't prep for that.
We didn't. I'm putting you on
But
the spot.
let me see. Let me take a look at some of the things that I have here and see if I can find something. What would you like to talk about while I'm searching for that?
The idea of staying quiet, not only in the sense of being still within the house, of not going out a lot, and not as a way of distancing yourself further by any means, but as a way of holding that power. We were talking about this at the beginning, being able to have a greater capacity to contain more energy within your field in general. And when you go and just talk about all the things you've learned to everyone, you're dissipating it. You're sharing the energy because you don't want to hold it anymore. And it's not that you want to keep secrets, right? You're not trying to like hide anything from anyone, but just being very, very mindful about who you're talking to and how you're receiving what they're saying, especially at this time. A lot of people are just talking out of fear, out of missing social interactions that they've grown accustomed to, and therefore they're trying to distract themselves and you, because they want misery loves company, so they want everybody to be on the same level. And a lot of times when we are in this state of awakening, in this state of discovery, in this state of seeking, we get really excited to share what we know, and we become really good evangelists for witchcraft. Weirdly. So being in a state of quiet contemplation and quiet meditation, and if you feel like you are really wanting to be seen and heard and express all of the discoveries you're making and all the synchronicities that are happening, really pause for a moment before you tell anyone and think, am I doing this out of ego, out of wanting acknowledgement for having come this far? Or am I doing this because I'm trying to save them, playing the hero, again, playing into that victim cycle, because then you're seeing them as a victim who needs rescuing by you? Mm-hmm. Or are you sharing it because they're ready, because they've asked you? And really, it's only the third one that's the go ahead to speak about the things that you're discovering. So like even the stuff in this podcast, most human beings on this planet are not ready or at a level to hear it. And that's why I think it's still safe to say some of this stuff, because not everyone's going to find it, right? If you found this podcast, you're ready to hear it. If we say something and you want to turn it off, because then you aren't in a space to hear what we're going to say after, right?
Yeah. If you don't like what we're saying now, you're definitely you're not going to like episode 10. And yeah. but I will say this, kudos to you for listening this far.
Right. And it's also like, what are we ready to handle and when, and what do we have to integrate first before we can go further? And integrating what we've already spoken about. And I've said some things on this podcast that even now I'm thinking back like, oh shoot, should I maybe have not shared that, because not everybody's ready to hear it. Not everybody's ready to acknowledge some of the origins of our planet and our human selves and the way that the cycles work. And then I think, no, this needs to be shared for a reason, because there are people who maybe won't hear it otherwise, but who are ready. And that's my hope. That's when we keep coming back to this like gateway drug philosophy. Maybe you don't understand 90% of what I said, but I've said one word that activates a memory within you that makes you go and investigate it further and go and search it out yourself. And maybe you come and seek out me for like magic and specific types of training things, or maybe you go seek out Jeremy because you like what he said about angels, or maybe you come seek out me for something that has to do with Graham Hancock. Maybe you go seek out Jeremy for something that has to do with mantra. So it's both of us working to push you to find the truth for yourself and not take anything that we say at face value, I think is very, very important.
Yeah. And you can tell that something's important to you when you really enunciate. And I like it when you do that.
My God, I think that microdose might have been a bit bigger.
Really?
Every single time that I have looked up at my vision board that I have behind my tarot cards, I have seen something different in this jungle picture, and it is blowing I saw two things that looked like they were spying on me, so I carved them out with my athame. Like I literally grabbed my athame off my altar. And
what happened?
I think there's an actual 2-hour limit. I don't know if we edit it together.
All right. Well, if it didn't, then people heard about you carving things out of your.
I mean, I can edit that out if we want to. Either way, let me tell you this, dude. They looked like robots. They looked like they were spying on me, like they had cameras, and I was like, I don't remember that being in this part of the picture.
Yeah,
it's gone now. And like as I carved it, the white came through, and it was like this cool light filled space. And then I looked up just now and I totally saw the Virgin Mary.
Nice. Don't carve her out. She's cool.
I'm not carving her out. There's also like a little like something sitting near the edge of the pool. It's very interesting. This picture just keeps evolving. And so I'm just wondering if I've just been staring at it for 2 hours and maybe my eyes are finally seeing things, or if actually there was a tiny, tiny microdose. I don't understand.
Microdose of what?
Guess.
Love.
It was mushrooms that had been grown in a sound healing room where the beautiful people who were tending to them were playing sound healing instruments over them as they grew, and also poured ayahuasca brew into the soil.
This also makes sense as to why we just did a 2-hour podcast.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what?
No.
It was hours and hours ago. Like this shouldn't, I don't know.
You can't put a time limit on that. You know how mama works?
She does.
So
and she's working.
That's good. Let her keep doing her thing. As you had asked me before, if there was a mantra for memory. Yeah. It's not necessarily memory, but it is for wisdom. It is a Tibetan mantra for Manjushri, who is associated with Saraswati in Tibetan Buddhism. And it is Om Ara Pat Sa Na Di Di Di. Om Ara Pat Sa Na Di Di Di. Om Ara Pat Sa Na Di Di Di. And the translation for that is salutations to he who is realized in the heart through the great syllable D.
So great. I don't know why I love that mantra so much.
Yeah, it feels so good. So for Tibetan, the Tibetans, this book at least says, for them, she, talking about Saraswati, for Tibetans, Saraswati is the spouse and power of the Bodhisattva of wisdom, Manjushri. Holding the sword of discriminating wisdom, he is able to cut through illusion and appearance and arrive at the essential underlying and fundamental truth of anything. So, what up, Manjushri?
I love it.
Yeah, me too.
Will you, we'll add this to the show notes if you will send me that.
Most assuredly. And that will, recording of that will be up this week on my Patreon. So do check that out if you want 108 of the Manjushri Mantra.
Yeah.
Manjushri.
And if you want, are you doing sound healing sessions?
I am. Again, there's stuff has been the wording has been updated, and then there was this whole conversation that I wanted to have to you about the podcast. So those will most likely go back up as well. If you are a prescriber, if you're a subscriber to Amy's Patreon, those are going up. What, you're putting up one a month now of the old podcast? Yeah. So I'll do the same thing. I'll catch up to where you are, and then add the others as we go. So you can follow either of us or support either of us. This is something that we are both very passionate about. We both love doing this. And if you are a supporter of both of us, I would ask if it's possible for you to join both of our Patreons and send us a little bit of money. $3 a month is really not that much. And we
can split it with each other, but
we can, yeah. So, but it's a whole thing too about just living in fair exchange. And we're going to keep doing this no matter what, but it's just, I'm very grateful for the fact that we actually have people listening to this. And if that is a possibility, I'd love to put that out there into the universe, that abundance does come in. And also, if there are things that other people want, like I have tiers up now that are mantras that are based, that there are actually group Zoom calls, a monthly group Zoom call for people to get on. We'll have a topic. We'll have an oracle reading or a poll that there will be a discussion about whatever the oracle that's pulled, and then we'll just have a group discussion as well. So I'm looking to build the community if people are interested in doing that. And if there's other things that people are interested in doing, let us know what it is that you would like, and check out the other tiers that I have on there. So
if you want like one-on-one healing sessions, Jeremy
that
can
is
do that.
That is also a part of it. Yeah. The highest tier is literally a monthly session with me. Once all this quarantine stuff is done, if you would like to have a monthly one-on-one in person with me, if you are in Boulder or if you are in Denver, then that can happen. Otherwise, we can do either a sound healing, a conversation, a energy session via Zoom or via another platform.
Do you do craniosacral?
I do craniosacral. So yeah, there's a lot of different energy work options that we can do if people are interested. And it's a really big discount actually for what you would be getting by doing it over the internet, if that is what people are down for. So
yeah. And I'm doing astrology and Akashic and tarot and one-on-one coaching. I call it mentoring because technically in the coaching program that I did, what I do is not perfect coaching because I offer too many suggestions. I don't force you to come up with all of them yourself the way you should in coaching. So I call it spiritual mentorship. And I am going to be launching basically a school for covens, being in a space of wanting to share my knowledge with more people, and not everybody being able to do the one-on-ones with me for various reasons. I wanted to make something that was a little bit more affordable. And so on the Patreon, there's still space for, I believe it's 11 because it's a limit. So that as you get to work with me, you're also getting to work with each other. And it's going to be an initiation journey where you're going through different rites of passage and different pantheons and getting to know different tools of the magical trade. And by the end, be able to be a fully fledged coven altogether, and have the option of continuing as a group with advanced practices or fledging out on your own after 6 months into the wide, wide world of the esoteric and the occult.
And being a solo practitioner is pretty fun, I will say.
It is, but it's also nice. Like you just said you wanted to build a community.
It's true, but I have been a solo practitioner this entire time. So
yeah, even when we were living in the same house, we did stuff in different rooms.
Yeah, seriously.
So weird. But yeah, I think there's there's so many options to find teachers right now online because of all that's going on. Please take advantage of it, even if it's not me and Jer. Please go seek out some of the people that are our teachers.
Mm-hmm.
You named some of the people you're working with. I named a few. Go back and have a listen if you want to know who they are. We don't have any more time. We're
Yeah.
already over time.
Well, I think we'll probably be posting 2 podcasts this week. It seems like, so if there's just like,
I don't know.
you know,
I'm
episode
gonna see
6
if I can
supplement.
jam it all together.
Well,
Yeah.
if it works, it works. If not, that I think an 8-minute podcast or 9-minute where we are now can also go up. It should be fine. But with that, I will say, if you are, I'll throw out authors that I really like. Thomas Ashley Farrand. He has quite a few books. He unfortunately passed away about 20 years ago, but a fantastic teacher. He has audiobooks. Israel Regardie is a fantastic author if you are looking to get into ceremonial magic, or if you're looking to get into more of a Western esotericism slant. The Tree of Life, an illustrated study of Setian magic, is a great primer. It's a great way to start. It's something that's easily digestible, and it's not too thick that you're going to be daunted by it. And if you're a super serious mantra advocate, and you're really if you're really excited about delving into some of the left-hand path stuff, Kali Kaula by Jan Fries is an excellent book. It is left hand, though, just so you know. You're not going to be, there's not a lot of bright and shininess. It's about the darker side of mantra. There's a lot of talks of like the darker sides of Saraswati, the darker sides of Lakshmi, the plate, like where the abundance actually comes from, where the creative source actually comes from with Saraswati. And of course, there's a lot of stuff on Kali in here. So, not for the faint of heart, and also not for people who are just kind of dabbling. I would wait on that one if you're just starting out. But the Thomas Ashley Farrand books and the Israel Regardie book are both excellent.
Yeah, and all of Graham Hancock's books, from Fingerprints of the Gods, Underworld, Magicians of the Gods, America Before, Supernatural. They're all such phenomenal sources of information that should trigger memories from past lives, if nothing else, as well as connect the dots on a lot of things. If you are interested in like the way esoteric, look up Edgar Casey himself and get there's one that I have, it's blue, I forget what it's called exactly. I think it's the Edgar Casey Companion, and read some of the channelings that came through him. Look up the Corpus Hermeticum. A lot of times you'll find the Kybalion a little easier, but the Corpus Hermeticum is the original, and it's Hermes Trismegistus, Hermes the thrice great, and he is Thoth, the Egyptian god, come back into Hermes form and imparting his wisdom, and that's where alchemy is based. So if you hear me talking about that is fantastic. Astrology for the Soul by Jan Spiller is great for North Node stuff, and for just figuring out some of the lesser known parts of your astrological chart when it comes to how North Node operates. And Yoni Shakti is great for the Mahavidyas. We've talked about them before. We've talked about a couple of very specifically, like Kali and Kamalatmika, or Kamala as she's sometimes known. Yoni Shakti by Uma Dinsmore Tuli is something I always recommend for everybody who's doing yoga practices. And as far as any of the other books, there's a link on my bio that takes you to the Amazon shop where I put them all up, because there are way too many to list. But the biggest, the newest one that I'm really loving right now is called Existential Kink by Carolyn Elliott. And it's a really phenomenal practice of integrating all of you. And she makes it super funny because she's a very intelligent and well-spoken woman who has a PhD in English.
Hey. She figured out a way to make money with an PhD in English.
She's got a 7-figure salary and a new baby. And I mean, if that's not enough motivation to read what she's written, then I don't know what to tell you. Yeah, honestly, always will say, go back to Spiral Dance. If you haven't read Spiral Dance, go read Spiral Dance if you're interested in witchcraft. It will only help you. And the same with Drawing Down the Moon. If you don't know the history of goddess religions and the rise of New Age religions and paganism within the modern era, it's really, really, really helpful to kind of put everything into context of what was happening when and why. It's a little bit dense, Drawing Down the Moon is, but it's so worth it. And as far as like my personal teachers, someone that I've worked with a lot, Theo, his written name is Getty Parma, and he has books on ecstatic witchcraft, and one's called By Land, Sky, and Sea, and then the second one's Ecstatic Witchcraft. And then he also just finished one on the Iron Pentacle and on Elements of Magic with Jane Meredith, who's another amazing, amazing witch and woman I've worked with. And so yeah, those are
Yeah, just a couple.
just
I'll throw out Sir John Woodruff. He went by the name Arthur Avalon when he wrote his books, but he was one of the biggest names who brought a lot of Hindu sacred text to the Western world in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So any of his books too, like they're going to be a little bit denser because they were written 120 years ago, and people
they had better vocabulary.
They had a more dense vocabulary. So, but I was going to say too, you can find a lot of stuff, like you said, on Kindle, actually in bookstores, but there is a wealth of esoteric knowledge that is out there on the internet. Be mindful of the content that you're looking at. Make sure that the books are actually the books that are written by the authors, and that you're not just pulling stuff off of random websites. Like you can literally look up a PDF of mantras or PDF of whatever. Like, Google's an amazing thing. Try to use DuckDuckGo or something that doesn't track you. But like you can use these search engines just like a library catalog and find some really incredible stuff, and find stuff that speaks to you without having to spend thousands of dollars on books. Because a lot of these authors have passed away, and knowledge is free. You don't necessarily have to send a bunch of money to a publishing house to gain access to all of this information.
But
If you can't,
also,
it can't.
I don't trust the internet, and I really don't recommend anybody looking at the internet for stuff when it comes to this.
Never do anything with the internet.
Well, no, I mean, when it comes to magical practice, anybody can publish anything online.
Well, I know that's what I'm saying. Like if you're, whether it's Israel Regardie or any of the people who have actually put their life's work putting this stuff out there, you can't. I definitely say, put money into the pockets of the authors and of the artists who are putting this stuff out. But you can find, yes, yeah. But you can find, you have access to this stuff. Libraries actually still carry it, So like,
yeah. Well, that's the other thing too, is if you all you have to do is sign up for a library membership, and you would be able to get a lot of these things online.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's a good place to stop now that we've given everybody a 40-book reading list.
2 hours and 45 minutes, dude.
There's no way.
I don't know. I'm amazed. If anybody's listening this far, oh my God, please turn it off.
Yeah, go to sleep.
Go do something else. I hope that you were doing something productive while you're listening to us ramble. But this episode, I think, needed to happen because we were feeling a lot of the vibes of change is good, change needs to happen, and we changed a lot since we first recorded. But we also haven't, because now we're tangenting.
Yeah.
Tangenting.
Well, keep strong. You go to sleep. We will talk soon. And thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you all. Love you so much.
Love you too. Bye.
Bye.